Everyone, Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development, your host of Sales and Cigars. Got a cool episode today. Guest is Ron Story Jr. Ron hails from St. Louis, but he resides down in Medellin, Colombia. So there's a cool story there. We talk a little bit about cold outreach and his philosophy around that and how you can, as a salesperson, as a sales leader, as a business owner, how you can implement this and what the process looks like. We talk a lot about podcasting and guesting and why that's important and how that can help you tell your story. And he's got a great offer for the listeners. So you go to his website. I'm not even going to tell you. You got to listen to the episode. It'll be in the show notes. Go grab a cigar, grab a cocktail, strap in for another great episode of Sales and Cigars. So Ron, welcome to Sales and Cigars. I appreciate you taking some time to have a chat.
Hey, thanks for having me, Walter. I really appreciate it.
I've been looking forward to this conversation. I didn't realize you were going to be in St. Louis because where you normally live is in Colombia, right? That's where you hang your hat normally?
Yep, my family, my kids, my girlfriend, everything were in Medellin, Colombia, 7,000 feet above sea level in the Andes Mountains.
And today you're sitting in downtown St. Louis. So
Today I'm right on the Mississippi River, right downtown St. Louis, a 5-minute walk from a Cardinals game.
oh, okay. All right, cool. So what what I wanted to start with is, your journey is to be the entrepreneur that you are. That I think when the way I look at it is when I was 10 years old, I didn't think about being what I am today. I didn't even think about sales back then. And we our lives always take turns. So I think if somebody like yourself who grew up in the Midwest and ends up living in Medellin, Colombia, there's some interesting stories there. So why don't you kind of walk us through your journey?
Yeah, so I grew up in East St. Louis, Illinois, which was at one point the most dangerous city in the country. And I grew up there in the 80s. I was born in the late 70s. And, I was fortunate. Everyone nowadays talks about how school teachers don't make a lot of money. But my mom and dad were both school teachers, so we had stable income in my family. So I was a fortunate kid living in a rough city, but I had stable income. And that upbringing allowed me to, have some experiences that a lot of my friends didn't have. So I had some alternatives to selling drugs or doing crazy things. I was collecting aluminum cans and recycling them, right? And that industrial, I guess, like hard work of just going and collecting things and negotiating with the metal recyclers on the price, that just continued throughout my life. It went from me doing that to get Nintendo and Sega Genesis games, enough
Wow.
money for those, all the way to me eventually selling insurance while I was still a college student for Northwestern Mutual. I did that for 4 years. I eventually had 8 Allstate agencies. I went on to run Illinois and Iowa for Farmers Insurance. And yeah, I got tired of the insurance business, realized that there was a kind of a ceiling on how much you could make without owning an insurance company. And I started doing sales consulting for software companies and here in St. Louis. So a lot of the venture capital firms here in St. Louis, they would hire me to do consulting to build out the sales platforms for their portfolio companies. So that's what I've done.
So I mean, you started out being entrepreneurial to get your video game deal when you were a kid. You had parents who cared, that had stability, that gave you that foundation of good work ethic, gave you options. You busted your butt to to get to where you are. Now you're an entrepreneur. So why don't we talk a little bit about what it is that you do, or what the um, our audience are a lot of senior sales executives. They're a lot of business owners. They have an entrepreneurial growth mindset. So, what you're doing now is sort of diverse. So why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so back in 2018, I got tired of taking sales contracts to do consulting for these companies, and they would go on to sell to other companies for millions of dollars. I didn't get any of that. I had no equity in any of those deals. So in 2018, I bought a failing software company, and I turned that into PitchDB, which is the company I run today, which allows entrepreneurs or anyone who has a message that they want to get out there to get booked on podcasts, to get press coverage for themselves or for their companies, and to do live speaking gigs, paid speaking gigs. But all I basically did was took a company that had great software, because I can't code anything, and implemented what I had already been implementing, my sales playbook, into that software company.
Awesome. So I think one of the other things when we first met, we sort of talked about um, cold outreach and lead gen, and that's an area that small companies, mid-sized companies struggle with.
Mhm.
And I think you have some tools in your toolbox, some ideas there, some ways to help people. So can you share a little bit about your philosophy on that and why it's important, why it works, and then we can get
Well,
into the nitty gritty.
of course. So I came from a cold calling background, right? As a financial advisor, selling insurance and investments. And back in the early 2000s, there was no cold email. It was hard to find someone's email address, right? But you could find anybody's phone number because they had phone books, right? And the internet was just coming along where you could look up this is pre-social media. You could look up someone's phone number at their office, give them a call, or if you got a referral. So I come from a cold calling background, right? And once I started working with software companies, I realized, wait a minute, they're writing code to go to websites and scrape the email addresses off, and then they're sending emails to these people. And all of the major software companies that sell B2B, they're grown using email. They're not grown using Facebook ads, or some of them use Facebook ads and Google ads, but their primary source of sales meetings is cold outreach via email. And the beauty of cold outreach via email, it's all the effectiveness and scalability of cold calling without any of the headaches. And the reason being is I could sit in here and I could call 200 people a day like I used to do at Northwestern Mutual, and I would only probably talk to 7 people out of 200, but I
Yeah.
wasted 6 hours. It's like, dude, come on. But
One
I can send, yeah, I can send 200 emails a day, ignore the 193 that don't want to talk to me, and just have the 7 book themselves on my calendar. And all I do is set it up once, and it just runs. And as long as it has leads in it, it just keeps running. It keeps running. So that's been the biggest advantage, is that it's scalable, where I'm limited by the amount of time in the day. So if I know that it takes 200 outbound contacts to get 5 appointments, but I want 10 appointments a day, it would be almost impossible for me to do 400 calls, right? And keep the same enthusiasm through all 400. But I can send 400 emails and have the same enthusiasm because I'm not doing it. I'm not dealing with the rejection, and then I can multitask and do something else while those emails are going out. So that's the advantage of cold outreach.
So in what you're doing with the cold outreach, right? You reach out, you send them this cold email, and you have to say something, you have to write something that gets their attention. So is there an angle there? How do you discern getting that copy right?
Yeah, so I'll kind of give you the backstory on how I came up with my approach to cold email. It came from me being a 5'6" guy, average looks, over average weight, but I love women. I wanted to go out and talk to women. Well, what I realized is that I couldn't be weird when I approached them. I already had enough disadvantages. I already had enough disadvantages, so I couldn't be a creep when I went to talk to them, right?
I hear
So I
you. I
learned
hear you.
you don't approach a woman to get a wife. You approach her to get a response, right? So I wasn't going up to her trying to marry her right off the bat. I was going up to her trying to engage with her, right? And a lot of people, when they send emails, they send more of proposal or marriage emails because that's what we're used to doing in marketing. But in cold outreach sales email, not marketing emails, but a sales email is about engagement. So some of my best performing emails are 2 sentences, right?
Yep.
Hey, Walter, I found your information on LinkedIn. Are you looking for some more sales appointments on a pay per performance basis? That's it. I would just send that. And it's a great thing because the person can make a binary decision. Either they're looking for more sales appointments or they're not, right? It's not, hey, do you like me? Do you want to know my credentials in the background? No. Do you need more sales appointments? If you don't need sales appointments, I don't need to tell you how cool of a guy I am, right? So it's just like going up, if you're at a bar, you go over and you say, hey, how's it going? And if she points to her ring, I just walk away from her. I'm not going to tell her my name or anything. Just leave. No need to be wasting my time because she already showed me she wasn't interested, right? So if you aren't looking for more sales appointments or whatever my business problem, the problem that we solve as a business, then there's no reason for me to give you all of my credentials because now I'm being weird. You've already told me, you don't need, I can't even help you even if I told you all this stuff, right? So I kind of think of, so that comes down to a lead generation or a lead classification issue, right? And if you don't mind, I want to explain to your audience how I think leads are classified, right?
Okay.
And when we think about an offer, there are people who have what I call a broken leg. They have a problem that they're aware of and it is causing pain, right? So some of our businesses solve broken leg issues, right? That's one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, we have clients with terminal illnesses. They have a problem, they don't even know it, but they have to trust us before they would allow us to diagnose them, right? So
and we're
it's
not
like,
wearing a white coat.
well, I didn't hear you. What did you say? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're not a doctor wearing a white coat and a stethoscope, so we got to go earn that trust, right?
Yeah, you have to build that trust some way before they would get naked in front of you and let you examine them, right? So cold email is very hard to sell if you're an accounting practice. What are you going to do? Say, hey, are your books all messed up? I'm not telling a stranger that. Like, just,
Right.
Exactly. It's like, no, I'm not going to tell that to a stranger. That's too personal. I need to trust the person before I tell them about my tax issues, right? And then, but there's something in the middle where I think it's a little sweet spot in the middle that I call the rock in the shoe. And the rock in the shoe is annoying, but it's not painful enough for you to change. You'll just deal with it, right? And I think a lot of people have described their businesses in a way that they're attempting to attract the rock in the shoe just because they haven't been able to really pinpoint the pain from talking with customers to understand how to speak directly to the pain that the person is experiencing, right? But if you can nail that down to where you're talking to someone about the rock in the shoe or a broken leg, you can have unlimited sales appointments because you can diagnose them and the pain is real.
And they recognize it because of the way you're speaking.
Exactly. If I asked you right now, hey, Walter, is your leg broken? You know. It's not like, nah, I think it is. No, you know whether your leg is broken or not. It's very clear, right? But also if I said, hey, sometimes when you wake up in the morning, do you have back pain? Right? It's not a broken leg, but you can recall whether that issue happens when you get up in the morning, right? So that would be like the rock in the shoe thing. But if I said, hey, Walter, do you have fingernail cancer? You don't know. Like, it's not causing any pain. It may be something it's like, dude, like, I don't know if I have it. I don't have any pain right now. What are you talking about? Right? So once you figure that out, now you can make your offer a lot stronger to a stranger because you can be very direct with them and not have to give your qualifications because you would speak directly to that pain that they have. You don't want to sound like the pharmaceutical companies, right? When you watch a pharmaceutical commercial, they list 45 symptoms. Does your back hurt? Do you lean to the side when you walk? Does your hand do this? You may have mesothelioma. Dude,
Right.
like, come on, man. Like, it's not a very good ad, you know?
Population. Exactly. Well, but the other thing that you're talking about, and you're helping business owners think about it, and salespeople, is speaking to that prospect about the problems that they have in the context that they experience them, right? So if they got a rock in the shoe and you can describe what that feels like for them at their place and their company, and being able to hit that for them in their space, you're speaking to them about a problem and not pitching them on helping them get the rock out of the shoe. You're helping them identify, I understand you and I understand the problem. And that's sort of the perception that comes out of that type of email. Am I close there to the thinking?
No, you hit it right on the head. I think the most underused skill of any salesperson, especially nowadays, is listening, right? Being able to go out and just listen to your current customers. Because I promise you, whatever you're selling, your customer didn't buy it because of the way that you sold it. There's something underneath that a lot of your customers will never tell you the reason why they use your software, your service, or whatever business that you're in. But you'll never know until you've talked to them after they've engaged with the product, right? So I thought our customers was using my software a particular way. And then I interviewed them and they're like, no, we don't even use it for that. We use it because of this. And I'm like, oh, that's dumb, right? I never thought about that. Let me change my messaging to speak their language. So there's a concept that I like to use, which is consultant assumptions versus client confessions. When you're first starting off with your new marketing messages, you're making a lot of consultant assumptions, right? But you want to talk to enough clients based on those assumptions to be able to get the client confession, right? So then now my marketing messages are in their language, right? So let me give you an example. I used the two sentence email saying, hey, I help coaches to set sales appointments without having to dance on TikTok so that they could, grow their companies, right? Let's say that that's my thing. You notice I didn't say I sent cold emails to strangers that some people would call spam. Right? Because my clients don't call it cold email. My clients, they say, no, I need more sales appointments. They don't care how I get them. Whether I call them on the phone, I send emails, I put up a billboard, I run Google ads. They want sales appointments. Who cares about the method, right?
As long as it's ethical, that's all they're looking for is the outcome that you're creating. And what I heard you say, and I think this is an important point, really important point that you made, is that as a salesperson or as a business owner, we think that we're doing this, or we think the problem looks like this, or it sounds like this, and we really need to take steps, especially if we have 50, 100, thousands of customers, to go have conversations with them to start to uncover what it is they're doing, why they're doing it, why they made those decisions, and then be able to pull that back and like, oh, that's completely different than what I thought. And that gives us that tool, that gives us that context for us to talk to them, whether it be in person during a discovery call or in the outreach with an email. I mean, all of that is informed by being proactive and understanding what our customer really needs and using their language. I mean, I think that's an important piece that's what business owners really need to be going and grabbing, and assuming that salespeople know how to do that is a critical mistake.
100%. And with cold email, in our agency, we don't do any, hey, we're going to send you this email and click a link, right? It would be like, hey, send out an email and tell them to click a link and go sign up for this. We don't believe that works, right? Because reaching out to someone via email is very personal, right? If we go back to the dating example, it would be equivalent to going up to someone saying, hey, I would love to take you to coffee. Here's my link to my Calendly, grab a time. It's like, dude, like you're right here. What are you doing me like that for, right? So
Right.
what you would say is, hey, I would love to hop on a 10-minute call to see if it makes sense, right? So we're pushing for a meeting. So the email isn't to turn the person into a client. The email is to get the meeting. And in the meeting, that's when you learn to listen about what they're doing, and then you can sell your product. But
Yeah,
most of the time, they make the mistake of trying to pitch in the email, right? And you don't want to do that. The email is just there. You're reaching out to see if they have the problem and if they're willing to invest 10 minutes to talk about it.
Hey, thanks for being part of the Sales and Cigar community. I wanted to share that I wrote a book, The 7 Critical Mistakes CEOs Make with Their Sales Organization. The CEOs who've read it tell me I cut to the chase quickly, get to the point, explain exactly what they're experiencing, why they're experiencing it, and how to fix it. So if you want a free copy, go check out the link in the show notes. Now let's get back to the interview. Thanks.
yeah. If you go back to your original analogy of trying to meet the lady at the end of the bar or the woman across the room in the party, I mean that cold outreach there is maybe a smile, maybe catching somebody's eye, maybe kind of walking over there and saying something that's going to engage them. Like that's that whole, I mean, it's a very similar in business. It's very similar to that. And you can turn somebody off real quickly if you make the wrong facial expression or you say the wrong words too early. Like you said, you're not trying to marry somebody right away, and that's when you get yourself into trouble. And we do it in business every day. People start pitching and chasing, and it's awful. But just
Yeah,
trying
yeah.
to engage.
No, I 100% agree. We always talk about B2B and B2C and all of that, but in reality, it's P2P, it's person to person. So if you can develop the interpersonal skills, then that changes everything because you understand the human dynamic. Nobody wants to be pitched in the first 30 seconds. Nobody wants to read an 8-paragraph email from a stranger, right? So I'm just trying to see if they have that issue when I reach out to them. If it's worth investing 10 minutes, we can hop on a call and I can learn a little bit more about what they're doing. Now, here's the key. Always, and most salespeople know this, which is, you want to listen 80% of the time because they're going to give you all of the language and all of the bullets and how they describe their problem in order for you to use that language right back with them, right? Well, here's what most companies have done. They have removed the interpersonal part and just went straight to Facebook advertising or some type of advertising. Now, I'm a firm believer that if you can get the outreach conversations going, you'll learn what to put in your Facebook ads. I haven't found a company that did outreach and cold meetings first, where they talk with customers first, and then use that language in their advertising, where they didn't improve their advertising. It automatically improves your advertising when you're speaking to that person and directly to them, right? So imagine if someone just decided, hey, I target African American men that are entrepreneurs. Okay, cool. But if I got on a call with you and you told me about what you were doing and I started describing, hey, there are a lot of African American men that are from the Midwest that live in South America. I got hundreds of friends down there. We're all entrepreneurs. Well, you know what your ad should say? Or your email should say, hey guys, I know you're probably enjoying the great weather down in South America, right? It's nothing like the snow you're experiencing in Chicago and St. Louis. You can describe that. Now we're like, this dude really understands us. He understands. We appreciate 75-degree weather. But if you don't have that conversation with me, then you don't know how to speak to that, to build that rapport with us, whether it's just personal rapport or business problem solution rapport.
Yeah, it's being able to relate to somebody because, as you said, B2B is B2B, but ultimately there's some people involved. and we got to be able to relate to them. We got to be able to make them think we understand, and that we're not just pitching them. We're trying to figure out if we can help, because that's what sales is about helping people. Doesn't matter if you're selling financial services or if you're selling some coaching program or some development program. If you're not able to help that person or that person's organization, then you're you're not adding any value, and it's a disservice to everybody. So, and you can't get there unless you listen. As you said, we should be somebody said it's 50% listening. I think it's more like 75, 80% of the time we should be listening, and we can have conversations and ask questions without asking, making it sound like an interrogation. So that skill set is you can still make the contact, make your way over to the lady on the other side of the room, and then just sort of say all the wrong things, spill your drink all over them, right? Just make a mess, right? You still got to have that competency, so that we don't screw it up on the basics.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
let me give you an example. I think that I think you're making a really good point. One of the things that I've learned is that as an entrepreneur, we're rarely listened to. So the salesperson has a unique opportunity to actually empathize with the entrepreneur, because we're all day, nobody's listening to our problems, but we got to hear all of our employees' problems, all of our business partners' problems. We got to hear client issues, but nobody's listening to our issue, right? So in that sales call, you get a chance to build some rapport just by not saying anything and just say, hey, man, what's a problem you would pay to make go away? And they'll
that's
just tell you.
a really good point. The leader of the company, they're alone, right? They can't share their problems with their employees, right? Because they don't want to make them nervous. They don't want to scare them. They know they're not going to be able to help. So they, just by reaching out to them and listening, and really listening to what they're saying is is a great thing. I don't make a lot of cold calls, but I make cold calls like late on a Friday afternoon, because if I get that CEO, that president, that business owner, right? They're I the last couple that I've connected with people, they're like, "What are you doing calling me on a Friday?" And I'm like, "Well, it's about
Yeah.
happy hour, right?" And they're like, "Yeah, yeah. What are you doing calling me?" I'm like, "What are you doing answering the phone?" Right? And then they're like, "Well, I got to get all this right." And then we're into this conversation, and then I can poke them like, "Hey, where are your salespeople now?" Right? And then they're like, then they get upset, right? And we start, but we've related, and you're 100% right. They just want to be able to share and explain, and they just need somebody to listen to what they're saying. And you never know where it goes, right? It might go someplace great, it might not, but you're in the conversation, and that's the story. So
Yeah, I mean, if I relate that back to the dating scene, that's how I met my girlfriend, and 2 kids later, it worked. Now, let me tell you a funny story about that. When I first moved to Colombia, I didn't speak any Spanish. I knew maybe 20 words, right? But that didn't stop me from dating, because I could use Google Translate and write to them. But it was a problem when we got together, right? So, but I never tried to let them know that my Spanish was really terrible. So I would just sit there and I would just listen. And they would say, "You're one of the most attentive guys I've ever talked to." And I'm like, because I don't know what to say. I don't even know what you've been saying for the last half hour.
you're paying attention to body language, tone, facial expressions, and trying to match and work. That's hard. That's
Exactly.
that's
I'm watching all of those things, because that they communicate more than the words in my mind, right? So I learned that, like, oh, wait a minute, I don't have to have all the answers, right? I don't have to tell them that I'm smart. They want to be heard, and then at the end, after you listen to anybody long enough, they'll say, "Man, it was great talking to you," right?
that's
Now,
a true statement. So women and CEOs are very much alike. They need to be heard. They need to be, we need to listen to them. We need to learn from them. We need to make sure we're paying attention to all those details. I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways from this conversation, Ron. I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
that.
The one of the things I learned, have you ever had someone say, "Man, Walter, it was great listening to you"?
No, that happens very rarely.
That's where the opportunity lies,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Because it happens so infrequently, that's where the opportunity lies, right?
100%. I love it. So let's pivot a little bit. We're doing a podcast. We're having a
Mhm.
conversation, and the way I do these, it's like I'm trying to talk to interesting people. I'm trying to learn something. I'm trying to share with the audience where, if I learn a little something, they're probably going to learn a little something or hear something again that they've heard before that validates it. So, you know, one of your organizations um, is supporting the podcast industry and helping people. And I think the idea of if you have your own podcast, great. It's fun. It's expensive. It's a lot of work, but there's a way to get out to people and being a guest on a podcast is a great way to go talk to an audience. Um, and you don't have to, you have to be interesting. You got to tell a good story, right? Is what you've done. But yeah, how can you help people that have a good story get out there and share it with more people through the podcasting or on a stage?
Yep. So first, I want to talk about the value of podcasting, right? Nowadays, everybody's trying to build a personal brand or they're trying to build content for Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, all of these different places. Being a guest on a podcast is the most efficient way to do this, right? And I'll give you the greatest example right now with Walter and I. All I had to do was reach out to Walter, ask if he was looking for interesting guests. When he replies back, yes, I'm looking for interesting guests, Liliana, my assistant, takes it from there, right? Now, I don't have to edit the video. I don't have to upload it. I don't have to do anything, editing the audio.
Yeah.
I don't do anything. But but I get the same hour of content that he has. So it's beautiful because now I get my message out there to a new audience. You know, I get to help as long as I'm providing value. People will keep inviting me back, but I get the video content and the audio content without any of the expense. So that's the first value of being on podcast. The second thing that you can benefit from being on podcast is that in the past, the world was controlled by megaphones. ABC, CBS, NBC, Oprah Winfrey. You had all these big channels that controlled major audiences. Nowadays, the world isn't controlled by megaphones anymore. It's controlled by microphones. Small podcasts, or I shouldn't say small, but small audiences that may be 1,000, 5,000, even 50,000 listeners, a lot smaller than what ABC used to get back in the 80s, where they're getting millions of people watching the news because there were only 4 stations, right? But you'll get 50,000 or whatever, very niche groups of people. On this podcast, Sales and Cigars, I promise you nobody's on here listening because they wanted to learn about gardening. It's very specific that this is a sales podcast. So it's going to be salespeople and people that like cigars that are going to be on listening to Sales and Cigars. So you get to find the niche audiences. So I can talk about very detailed things that I could never cover on Oprah Winfrey, right? Because Oprah Winfrey is full of 40-year-old women who doesn't want to hear about cigars or lead segmentations if they're not in sales, right? If they're in sales, they may like those things, but if they're not, it doesn't work. So the first benefit is that you get free content. The second benefit is that you get your message out to a very specific audience. And here's the third and final benefit. The engagement and the referral from Walter or whatever podcast host is no different than a client referral. And I'll explain to you why. You who's listening to this, you already trust Walter. So by him having me as a guest, you're saying that I trust him enough to believe that he won't let an idiot on his show, or even if he did, he's not going to publish it. He can not put it out if I'm stupid, right? But if you're hearing this, it's because I get to borrow the credibility of Walter to speak to his audience, right? So that's a strong referral. We call that third party authority, right? I get to borrow Walter's authority in order to talk to his audience as if I'm an extension of him. That's huge. That is huge. No different if you wanted to be on Dave Ramsey or some other show. By being on Dave Ramsey's show, it's an extension that Dave has vetted you and trust that you have the right information. So now that we understand those three things and why you should be getting on podcast, what we do is simple. We give you the email addresses of any podcaster that you want, and you can send them a cold email. That's it. That's what we do.
So it's I mean, you made the case, right? Because it's a method to marketing your story, right? You have to be interesting. You got to be able to tell the story, but it's you're leveraging this what Chet Holmes used to call, the stadium pitch, right? And that idea was you're standing at the 50-yard line of a stadium, and the stadium's full. You got 60,000 people or 80,000 people, and they all had to be there. And then you're going to tell them what the topic is that you're going to talk about. It's got to be interesting to hold their attention. Now they can get up and leave at that point, but if you give an interesting story, you give them an interesting title of what your topic's going to be, they'll stick around and listen. And now you're talking to a huge number of people that are in your segment that we're niching it down to the people that are more likely to get some value out of what it is we're talking about. And it's actually something that I'm focused on, to be on 50 podcasts over the course of a year, just to be able to do all of the things that you eloquently stated, that those three things are important. And most people forget about the third. Most people forget about that ability that, somebody's allowed you the time to be on their podcast because they think that you're going to bring something to the party and that you're going to share something and sound smart. And that's part of our goal. Like, I want my guests to be able to share ideas and something for us to have an interesting conversation that gives value to the audience. And that's what keeps the audience growing and coming back. And that's what's happening. So,
yeah, that Chet Holmes book is one of my favorite books of all time. If you've never read The Ultimate Sales Machine, this book here, it is incredible. You all should go get it. If you're on video and you see it, it's called The Ultimate Sales Machine. Yeah, there it is right there. I got the digital version. And, unfortunately, Chet passed away maybe 15 years ago, but that book has totally changed my life. That's one of my favorite books of all time.
well, so you have Amanda's updated version where in the Audible, where she's come and, added some of the stories behind it. She's added a couple of chapters to what her dad had put together, because she's
Yep.
taken over the company.
Yep. Amanda Holmes.
Yeah. I mean, if you're in sales and you haven't read the book, go read the book. Like this weekend, go read the book, because
And,
it's something that you should revisit at least once a year to take the principles out of it. And the stadium pitch is one of those things, the executive briefing idea. I mean, these are all things that he's done with small and big companies that work. So another great story. So like, here's where I like to land, run. I always ask my guests one question that's the same. Do you have a relationship with cigars, past or present?
I have a past relationship with cigars. Presently, I don't, but I used to love cigars. I was the cigar man amongst my friends. I had a humidor in the back of my car. Like, I had bought a little small one, and everybody knew whenever they saw me, hey man, what you got in the back, So, but about maybe 10 years ago, I gave up cigars completely. Not that I don't enjoy them, I still go out with my friends, but for myself personally, I decided that chapter of my life had passed.
Yeah. But you had one in the back of your car.
Yeah, I had a mini humidor that held about 30 sticks in the trunk of my car at all times. We go to the golf course, everybody got sticks out of my trunk,
Nice. That's a good friend. It's like having a friend who's got a boat. Guy that's got a humidor in the back of his car.
That's
Um,
it.
I live in Michigan, so having a humidor in my car in January is not a good idea. They get a little frozen, but I like the commitment. That's good. So,
Yeah, I mean, but it was
you know,
portable. You could take it out. It was like about the size of a laptop and probably weighed maybe 15 pounds at the most. Wood,
yeah,
glass. It was really nice.
cool. I love it. It's a great story. Um, so you said a bunch of smart stuff. You got a bunch of opportunities to help people. I'm going to have the website in the show notes. What's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, so if they were to go on any social media platform, they can find me at Ron Story Jr. RonStoryJr. But I'm going to make them a cool offer. If they would like to use PitchDB, which is my software, in order to get booked on podcasts to do great interviews just like this one, if they go to pitchdb.com/cigars, that's going to be the word at the end, pitchdb.com/cigars. I will give you an opportunity to get a lifetime account. So you don't have to pay monthly fees. You can pay one time and get on as many podcasts as you would like over the rest of your sales or business career.
That is a huge offer. So, folks, um, pitchdb.com/cigars is a very generous offer from Ron. Go check that out. Ron, I appreciate that. My audience will appreciate that. Hopefully, you get flooded with folks looking for guesting on podcasts. It's a great way to go out, tell your story, get your company's name out there, get your name out there, and Ron can help you with that. Man, I
Yeah.
appreciate it. When are you headed back to South America from St. Louis?
In about 2 weeks, my babies call me 4 times a day, and they're Dad, you got to come back home. So I got to go back. I've been here visiting my mom. My mom's 75, and I try to come back every 3 months for a week or two.
Nice. Got to take care of moms. All right, man. Thank you. Appreciate it. Best of luck.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you for being part of the Sales and Cigars community. I want to take a quick second to share that I'm doing a free sales hiring challenge this month. I'm going to give you everything you need to hire sales superstars and avoid the sales duds. Check out the link in the show notes to be able to sign up for free. Now let's get back to the interview.